300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad to have you with us on a Wednesday morning. A lot to discuss, but I have to start with a story that has continued to percolate and continue to add layer after layer after layer. That's Kevin Durant with the Brooklyn Nets, because apparently as of yesterday, he has reaffirmed his commitment to the Brooklyn Nets. He and his agent, Rich Kleiman, they met with Sean Marks, Steve Nash, and the rest of the Brooklyn Nets brass and ownership group, Joe Tsai, and basically just said, I'm staying. And they agreed to continue this partnership that will keep Kevin Durant in Brooklyn, at least for the following season, because obviously this is the first year that his recent 4-year, $198 million contract that he signed last offseason, it goes into effect at the start of this year. So he's locked in. They have mutually agreed to continue this partnership. And obviously we all remember that back on June 30th, Durant requested a trade. Wasn't traded. So earlier this month in London, he met with Joe Tsai face-to-face, reaffirmed his desire to be traded, provided him that infamous ultimatum, choose me or fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks. Joe Tsai didn't cave. He didn't acquiesce. And now we're in the situation that we're in. And I personally believe, and I believed this ever since he first requested a trade, that the root of the issue, the root of the conflict for Kevin Durant, the root for his decision to want out of Brooklyn had to do with just a lack of trust. Lack of trust in Kyrie, lack of trust in the Brooklyn Nets organization. He felt betrayed that Kyrie wouldn't get vaccinated. He was irritated and frustrated with the way that James Harden was quitting his way out of Brooklyn and the way that that whole situation was mismanaged. He felt like the organization was letting him down in some respects. He was disappointed by the lack of creativity in the offensive schemes and the adjustments by head coach Steve Nash. He disliked the fact that the organization was unwilling to extend Kyrie and sign him to a long-term contract in the offseason. So there were a host of different reasons why Kevin Durant wanted out of Brooklyn. But it all revolves, to me, again, around that lack of trust. And that's so important, especially with talented elite star level players, is they need to feel like they've got trust within the organization. They've got trust that the organization is going to do everything they can to appease them. Some ownership groups and some general managers are willing to do that. Others are not. But while all those factors were at play, the second part to this is I don't think that Joe Tsai, Sean Marks, or the Nets were earnestly engaging in trade discussions. They did receive some legitimate offers for Kevin Durant. The Celtics, I think, offered a legitimate package around Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant. But other organizations, they were kind of pretending. They weren't really giving their best stuff. And so I think ultimately the Nets had kind of always established internally, we're not going to trade this guy. And I think at some point, Kevin Durant was forced to resign to the fact that he wasn't going anywhere. And he kind of had to accept that this is his situation. And in the long term and in the best interest of the team and the players, it was much more prudent to just break bread, try to move past this, put on a happy face, and return. Because ultimately, no chemistry, no cohesion can be established if you have your star player at least appearing to want out of the team. And I would imagine that this is what happened at this meeting between Rich Kleiman, Kevin Durant, and Nets brass. They met in LA just a couple days ago. And I would imagine that the Nets ownership group, they expressly laid out this situation, this reality to Kevin Durant. They probably said that they regretted to inform him that there unfortunately weren't any suitable trade partners at this time, and they just couldn't trade him. There wasn't anything that was, there weren't any packages that were commensurate with who Kevin Durant is. And that's the difficult part as an elite player. And from Kevin Durant's perspective, do I still think that he wants out of Brooklyn? Probably. I don't think he's perfectly content with Brooklyn. But he's been forced to face reality, and that is he's staying with the Brooklyn Nets. It's almost like he had intended to enter into one of those hypersleep pods from Interstellar and set a waking up date where when he'd wake up, he'd be traded somewhere else. And unfortunately, that wake-up date got set way too early, and he woke up and was still with the Brooklyn Nets, and unfortunately had to face that reality again. And you have to make the best of the situation that you're in. But it was just the smartest basketball decision once he realized he wasn't going to be traded anywhere. Better to try to establish some good faith, some trust as early on in this offseason as you can. It's all about the trust. And if the trust isn't there, the team's not going to have much success. We saw that the chemistry is what plagued them last season. Now, as it relates to the dynamic with Steve Nash, their head coach, that's uncertain. That's uncertain because if someone was trying to get me fired behind my back, would I be eager to work with that person again? Ask me later if I'm in that situation. Now, a theory, I've often theorized, I don't know how much I truly believe this, but part of me almost wonders if Kevin Durant actually tipped Steve Nash off about, hey, I'm going to basically provide the Nets with this ultimatum, either choose me or choose you. And he kind of greenlit the idea to KD because he knew fully well he had the full support and backing of Nets ownership group. Now, I don't truly and firmly believe that, but it's something that I've hypothesized perhaps could be at play given their previous relationship, given the fact that it had seemed on the surface like those two guys had mutual respect for one another. And Kevin Durant had spoken glowingly about him. But you think about Durant dealing with the Kyrie situation, dealing with Harden, dealing with the ignominy of losing in the first round to the Celtics, getting swept in the first round. All of that floating around, and now he's got to return back to this team. But the reality is, for Kevin Durant, there are worse places to return to. And the Brooklyn Nets were trying to pitch him on this idea. Listen, I know you're frustrated about not being traded, but try to enter this training camp into this season with a whole heart and look at the roster that we've compiled, that we've constructed around you. Because the reality is, you have KD, you have Kyrie. And again, this is a big if. This is a big if. But if Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons are actually able to play and are committed and invested in this season and in this team, this can be a very dangerous team. You've got KD, you've got Kyrie, you've got Ben Simmons, who purportedly is fully healthy and ready to go. You've retained Nick Claxton. You've re-signed Patty Mills. You acquired Royce O'Neal and TJ Warren. Joe Harris, the sniper, is coming back. You also still have Seth Curry. Those are 9 guys. This is a legitimate 9-man deep roster. And most NBA teams can't actually say that they've got 9 deep on their team. So for me, this is a really an extremely talented group. They're perhaps missing one serviceable big. But beyond that, it's about as good as it gets if you were the Brooklyn Nets. Now, chemistry is obviously the big issue. Again, that was their Achilles heel last year. They didn't have any chemistry. They weren't able to establish chemistry because their key players were missing substantial amount of time. And this might not be Shangri-La for KD. But again, it's about as ideal as it can get for a team that you're returning to. And if they are able to buy into this season, on paper, this is a team that should be contending for an NBA championship and already came into the season with some of the highest odds to win the NBA title. But now they could be the favorites or co-favorites to come out of the East. But certainly an interesting revelation. I also love how the statement that was released by he and Rich Kleiman, along with the Nets' Sean Marr, Steve Nash, and Joe Tsai, the ownership group, it was rubber stamped with the boardroom logo at the bottom of the statement. It's almost like they had to ensure that they were the ones that initiated everything. Just an interesting observation. Okay, so we're getting close to the start of the football season. The NFL is beginning in 2 weeks. The last week of the preseason is upon us. It's a very exciting time. But for some organizations, for some teams, there's still a lot of uncertainty. And one of those teams and franchises is the Seattle Seahawks. Now, we expected there to be a lot of turmoil given the fact that they just traded away their organization's greatest quarterback of all time, arguably, in Russell Wilson. So the quarterback position, we knew there was going to be a bit of an adjustment period. And so far, that adjustment period has continued because Pete Carroll just announced yesterday in a press conference that he's still undecided on who his quarterback is. He was praising both Geno Smith and Drew Lock and almost said that they perhaps have an embarrassment of riches that we may have 2 number 1 quarterbacks, in the words of Pete Carroll. So Pete Carroll is saying all the politically correct things to say. It's the perfect political rhetoric. You don't offend anyone by appealing to everyone. And this is one of the reasons why Pete Carroll, I actually have a lot of respect for Pete Carroll because of his commitment to his players. He's all in on his players. He's one of those few coaches, no matter how old he is, how young he is, he's participating in the drills. He's running with the guys. He wants to be in the locker room. He ingratiates himself extremely well with his football players. And that's one of the big reasons why he was such a successful coach in college at USC and why he's had a really successful stint the second go-round in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks, is because of his ability to connect on his players' level, gain their trust, gain their confidence, and gain their respect. You give out what you put in. You get out what you put in. I think that's how the saying goes. Something like that. And Pete Carroll has always been an extremely positive, rah-rah, pump, and circumstance type of coach. That's always been who he is. But right now, the Seattle Seahawks are in this precarious situation of trying to tank while also giving off the impression that they're trying to play hard and win, and convince the players that they're trying to play hard and win. And they're trying to straddle this delicate balance of going with a quarterback that is going to likely give them the best chance of losing and a greater chance of landing the number 1 overall draft pick, with the prospect of drafting a new quarterback in Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, while also exciting and energizing the fan base. Those are two polar opposite goals that they're trying to achieve at the moment. So they do have some good players. The Seattle Seahawks do have some good players. I like DK Metcalf. I like Tyler Lockett. I like Rashad Penny if he can stay healthy. I really like the running back they drafted out of Michigan State last year in the second round, Kenneth Walker III. Jamal Adams, a strong safety on the defensive side. Individually is a great player, but as a roster, this is not a very good roster. And this quarterback battle between Geno Smith and Drew Lock is kind of like a synecdoche. Those two guys, this quarterback battle basically sums up the roster. It sums up what this team is and who they're going to be this upcoming year. And again, even with some of these individual players that are good, and even Noah Fant, the nice young tight end prospect they acquired from the Denver Broncos in that Russell Wilson trade, we've seen how much football is about not only the team, but leadership at the quarterback position. Which one of those quarterbacks is going to actually galvanize the locker room? And again, setting aside whether or not the goal internally within the organization is to lose games, which quarterback do I firmly believe, if Pete Carroll hasn't made this decision already, which quarterback do I personally believe is going to command the most respect in that locker room and give the Seattle Seahawks not only the best chance of winning, but also the best chance of reinvigorating this fan base? To me, that's Geno Smith. Geno Smith is the guy. And so far, that's the guy that Pete Carroll has been leaning towards throughout the bulk of training camp. And there's several reasons for this. First of all, he's been a part of the organization already. This is his second season with the Seattle Seahawks. He played sparingly last year. Certainly wasn't a world beater, but he played in 4 games when Russell Wilson was out with that thumb injury. Completed 68% of his passes, threw 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Certainly wasn't setting the world on fire, but he took care of the football. And what I like about him, what I really appreciate about Geno Smith, is his competitive fire. He is a competitor. He competes. And most importantly, he truly cares about winning. He cares about playing hard. And while I do believe that Drew Lock is the more talented quarterback of the two, as far as leadership skills, leadership intangibles, Geno Smith is more familiar with that system. He's been in the NFL for 10 years. This is his 10th season. Drew Lock, we kind of know what Drew Lock is and who he's going to be. He's been in the NFL for 3 years. He has a career average of 59% completion percentage, 25 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. So we know who he is. He's got high potential, but he is unfortunately a turnover machine. And to me, if it's a narrow choice, if both guys are essentially the same, I'd opt for going for the veteran, likely command more respect, he's more vocal, not to mention he possesses more dual threat characteristics and traits. And neither one of these quarterbacks is the franchise quarterback, is the quarterback of the future. But which one of those guys I think is going to command more respect in the locker room? And that's really the question at hand here. It's going to be Drew Lock. And again, I mean, it's going to be Geno Smith. Now, I do remember, perhaps this is a little Freudian slip, because DK Metcalf, of course, delivered that famous, perhaps infamous quote right after the Seattle Seahawks traded Russell Wilson away and acquired Drew Lock. He had given Drew Lock a ringing endorsement, a public approval, said that he's backing him, that he's all behind him. Even with that being said, I just think if both guys are similar, you go with the veteran who is going to inspire the fan base a little bit more, because fans can also tell. I think that's the other aspect of it. You want fans to be invested. You want them to be involved, engaged. And they can sniff out someone that has a lot of ego and isn't doing everything that they can in the best interest of the team, versus the quarterback who I think is willing to put more of that personal ego aside. I think that man is Geno Smith. Final topic, my Malkin's moments. I'm ending a couple minutes early this week, but I have some great Malkin's moments. So first of all, I've been talking a ton about Albert Pujols. And some people are probably thinking that it's getting a bit redundant, and perhaps it is, but it's deserving. It's deserving, because Albert Pujols has been on a tear. The St. Louis Cardinals have been on a tear. Albert Pujols, not only did he hit his 693rd home run recently, but he has been slugging 1.300, above a 1, and specifically a 1.3 over his last 10 games, which is the highest mark in his entire career. This is a guy who's 42 years old. He's been in the majors for like 2 decades. And he's been actually leading the charge for the Cardinals, who have won 9 of their last 10 games. They've got, I believe, the 3rd best record in the National League, just behind the Dodgers and the New York Mets. Then it's the Cardinals. The Braves are behind them. They've been rolling. They've been on an absolute tear. They're over 70 wins on the season. And again, they just had an 8-game winning streak snapped, but Albert Pujols has been doing his part and then some. So some people may think I've been talking about him ad nauseum, but it's been deserving, because what he's doing at this age and just the totality of his career, it's impressive, and it's nothing short of spectacular. And we're all rooting for him to catch 696, which is how many home runs Alex Rodriguez has hit. That would tie him with A-Rod. If he can get to 700, he'd be just the 4th guy in MLB history to reach 700 home runs. We're all rooting for it, but so far, major shout out again to Albert Pujols. I have to keep giving him his flowers. Shout out to the San Diego Wave and Alex Morgan. The San Diego Wave are apparently set to break the National Women's Soccer League single game attendance record. Alex Morgan, of course, one of the most beloved and famous United States women's soccer players. She burst onto the scene several years ago during the USA's gold medal runs at the in the World Cup. And she revealed to ESPN that they have sold in excess of 27,000 tickets for their upcoming September 17th match against Angel City FC, which apparently would be enough to break the National Women's Soccer League's all-time attendance record for a standalone game. Again, the game is going to be held at Snapdragon Stadium on the new Mission Valley campus of San Diego State University, where the Aztecs play. And it's going to break a previous record for a standalone game of 25,218 attendees. That was set back in 2019 at Providence Park between the Portland Thorns and the North Carolina Courage. And obviously their new goal, there being the San Diego Wave, is to have a complete sellout, which would be over 32,000 seats and tickets being sold. So that's their overall big goal. But they're generating a lot of buzz. And I think that this is highlighting the growth and popularity of women's soccer, especially in the United States. There's always this conversation and comparison between the popularity of men's sports and women's sports. And when it comes to women's sports, the two sports in particular that have consistently matched the level of interest between the men's and the women's has been soccer and tennis. Women's tennis generates just as many views. The women's national soccer team is tremendous, and especially when it comes to key players that are not only outspoken, but that have big personalities. And Alex Morgan is certainly one of those. And I'm glad to see that a lot of people are going out to support that team and the women's soccer leagues in general, because it's very fun to watch. And there are tremendous, tremendous athletes and players. That's Malkin's moment. That's my second Malkin's moment. I got a couple more for you. Nick Saban. Shout out to the GOAT, the legend in college football, arguably the greatest college football head coach of all time. Even at 70 years old, he inked a new 8-year, $93.6 million extension to remain with the Tide through 2030, becoming once again college football's highest paid coach. It will give him a new average salary of $11.7 million per year, solidifying his status as the highest paid college football coach. And again, this guy is 70 years old, but doesn't seem to be slowing down one bit. Still has the same juice, still has the same energy and intensity towards coaching, towards recruiting. Again, college football and really collegiate sports in general, but especially these high revenue sports like football and basketball. To be a coach at that level, it's a 24-hour job. It's a 365 days out of the year type of job, because recruiting never stops. You're recruiting before the season. You're recruiting during the season. You're recruiting after the season. Perhaps they get about 3 weeks to a month where there's a little dry spell between maybe March and April, if even. There really aren't any off seasons. And he loves the grind. He enjoys going into people's homes and selling their kids on his coaching ability and on the university he represents. This is a guy who's won 7 national championships, 1 at LSU in 2003 and 6 at Alabama, I believe 2007, 2009, 2011, 2012, 2015, 2017, and 2020. In fact, he's actually guided Alabama to the college football national playoff championship game in 6 out of the last 7 seasons. And the Crimson Tide haven't lost more than 2 games in a season since 2010. He's just been absolutely phenomenal. And again, whether or not you like John McKay more, who's got 4, Woody Hayes, who's got 5, or Bear Bryant, who's got 6, everyone's got to respect what Nick Saban's able to do, the consistency with which he's doing it. We're seeing how much money is being thrown at college football coaches. We saw Jimbo Fisher's deal with Texas A&M, getting him $75 million. Kirby Smart, who just won a national championship at Georgia, signed like a 10-year, $120 or $112 million contract. We're seeing just boatloads of money being doled out. These universities, these alums, just have tranches of money that they can just dole out to keep these guys, and good for them and good for him. Even at 70 years old, still becoming the highest paid coach. That's fantastic. And finally, my final Malkin's moment. Shout out to Shaquem Griffin, who just announced this morning his retirement from the NFL after 4 seasons. The former UCF and Seattle Seahawks linebacker announced his retirement from the NFL after 4 seasons in the league. He was the first one-handed player drafted in NFL history. He was born with a disease where he lost his hand, I believe, and he was obviously it was a heartwarming story to see him get drafted, and more importantly, just what it represented. How even in a sport like National Football League, a professional sport, you can overcome, even without one hand. To still be able to play in the NFL is amazing. We give Jason Pierre-Paul credit for losing a finger in a fireworks accident. This guy's playing without a hand, and he managed to still get drafted and make an impact. So big shout out to him. He actually accepted an offer from the commissioner, Roger Goodell, to become part of the NFL's Legends community, which was something that he was excited about, being able to vocalize his opinions and help support underprivileged communities. So he's got a bright future ahead of him, but shout out to him. And even though it was a short career, just a tremendously inspiring, incredibly inspiring story on a personal level. So shout out to Shaquem Griffin. That's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. I know I'm finishing a little bit early today. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at morning_Joe or at Jonah_Malkin. Follow me on Instagram, JMalk97, and on TikTok, Jonah Malkin. Thank you so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.